with us at 11:01 today. Alien interruption. There we go. It is 1:27, and tonight we're going to talk about UFOs and earlier today on my own Facebook page, which you can see, I asked a question about aliens. Have you had a UFO and supernatural? And one of the things that came out is that a lot of people feel they're two different things. Some people think they are the same. But that is not the opening question I'm going to give tonight. And that is, and welcome, Reverend Don Lewis and Mary Hawk.
Hello.
And tonight,
Hello.
and to let you know what's happening, I tonight am invaded by, here we go, Tootsie. Tootsie is an alien cat. She's a very good cat. It's for the everyone who thinks that cats are good. She's a great cat and not so great pet, but there you go. You don't get many weird interruptions on my side tonight. We have the Tootsie interruption. But Don, why don't we get started with you? Have you had a UFO encounter?
Yes, I've had a couple of them, and there have been a number of other people in my family who have. Um, in their way, not especially remarkable. I mean, I think the most common quote UFO end quote is perceived as a ball of light, and there have been attempts to explain that as swamp gas, although there were no swamps near where we were having these experiences. And some people try to explain it as ball lightning, and some people explain it in a metaphysical way, which is how my family tended to view it. But yes, I have had that I guess we'd say encounter. My grandmother apparently had them regularly, um, and I do perceive it primarily in a metaphysical sense. I think the one point do want to make is that UFO means unidentified flying object. It doesn't necessarily imply what that might be, and people interpret it very differently.
And Mary, now
And
your
you,
turn.
Mary?
Well, and I was just telling Lord Don, I have had one experience in my life. It was about 35 years ago. My ex-husband woke me up and pointed out our bedroom window. There was a light in the sky over the ridge near us, and it was flashing blue, green, pink, blue, green, pink. And we watched it for a little while and it stopped. And later on, we went driving around on the ridge to see if we could see like a ham radio tower or anything. We didn't see it. We saw it two more mornings just at dawn or right before dawn, and then we never saw it again. So I don't have an explanation. I was not doing any magical or psychic work at that time in my life. I don't have an explanation. As Lord Don says, it's an unidentified flying object. I'm open to any explanation of what it might have been.
So I've had being in the city of Chicago. We have lots and lots of planes come over. At the time that I was growing up, it was the world's busiest airport. And then 40 miles north of O'Hare, we have the Great Lakes Naval Station, and it had air bases of all over Illinois, and we had a lot of Michigan stuff. So I mean, I've seen sort of planes that I didn't know what they were or that, but I will tell you an encounter that turned out to be a real thing. But if the government hit it, and this is something I don't like about what the government does. They will exploit UFOs for something they want to cover up. If you ever looked at Lake Michigan at night, it's black, it's dark, it's everything. And we saw a triangular UFO object. This was like 98, 99, no, maybe even a little earlier. And we were young, we were on the beach, we're having a good time, and we watched it for over 2 hours. And it was like moved around and would disappear and come back. And it was very triangular and it flew over the lake. And we swore, if you asked us that night, we saw a UFO. 5 years later, we saw a picture of the stealth bomber and how it looks from things. And
Mm.
what they were doing is they were testing the stealth bomber over the lake. And that's how
Yeah.
easy. Yeah, they were. They were just they encountered it. Kind of we matched up our records. Okay, that was the stealth bomber. We're just one of the first people to ever see a stealth bomber.
But that's why
And
it's so important to remember that the U means unidentified.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's my biggest encounter. Now I've had supernatural encounters,
Mhm.
and only recently in my life I've had it a couple of times. I've had encounters with demonic entities. I've had spiritual ones, but UFOs not so much. Mhm. I'm one of these people. I don't believe that there are aliens out there that we can reach. I mean, people forget I'm part of some days my memory, right down here in that, starts with an F. Fermi paradox
Oh.
groups that
Mhm.
says, we should have already seen them. We should not. I can't believe we're having the frequency, and yet they're becoming more and more frequent, and people are showing these weird pictures. We're having more and more of these things, and how are they covering it up that great? That's one of my biggest arguments. Why don't we see more? In this day of cell phones, over 2 billion cell phones are issued out there. Somebody said there's more cell phones or sensors than there are human beings. Why aren't we getting more of that? I mean, we are starting to see more of it, but why don't you think? Why is we don't get enough of that? How could the conspiracy be so big that we don't have on the front page of a newspaper or front page of Google UFO detected? And I'm starting to get more of those too.
Well, yes, but this is why, in my mind, this is really a spiritual phenomenon
Hmm.
and not a physical phenomenon. At least the kind of thing that you're talking about now.
Right.
The seeing of flying objects obviously can be a very physical phenomenon. But the people who believe they've had encounters with various, we'll say, aliens,
Hmm.
I don't doubt their experiences, but I think they're having spiritual experiences that they're misinterpreting because they don't have a spiritual context for it. And if you look at a lot of the stories, you'll notice that if they tell you the aftermath, that afterwards the person found they had new talents they never knew they had before, as if there's been a spiritual opening in their life, which doesn't make a lot of sense for aliens, but makes a lot of sense in a spiritual sense.
Right.
So I kind of agree with that. Now there
Hmm.
is an encounter with a UFO in 1846 that kind of, but people says maybe these aliens are different, and it was a big flying boat. Hmm?
Hmm.
And it was a big flying boat with balloons on it and fairy-like beings.
Hmm.
And this was out west, and like three little towns saw it, and it went through, and then it disappeared.
Hmm.
And they had slightly different opinions on it, but mostly the same. And the argument that this is they said a metaphysical encounter,
Hmm.
a dimensional
Mm-hmm.
encounter, and that these were the aliens, these were the UFOs, and they interpreted them in the most fantastic technological way they could understand. They were seeing
Yes.
something way beyond their comprehension, so it became a huge boat,
Hmm.
and the image looks like a flying saucer in some ways, held
Hmm.
up by balloons and fairies.
Yeah.
And the beings were very small, were smaller, about the same size you talk about, 3, 4, 5 feet, and they were elegant. They were seen as elegant, beautiful,
Hmm.
breathtaking. And I
There's
always
a
thought,
very famous story,
hmm,
but I cannot remember the year. But there supposedly were two people found um, with green skin.
the green cave skins of Brazil. What 19? It was in 1918, and they passed just out of disappearance in the 40s.
Hmm.
That's how recent it was. Yeah.
Yeah, so there have been a lot of interesting things. And as far as like the flying orbs, the
Hmm.
Egyptians wrote about those. They were seeing them all the way back then. The Romans wrote about them. Um, you encounter them through the Middle Ages, right up to the modern day. So
Hmm.
something has been consistent in people's experience. It's just a question of what it is.
Well,
But their understanding has not been consistent.
so I want to point out something that I think is super important to what our understanding of the world, beyond the simple that we are actually constructing reality in our brains to interpret it. But could another life form be existing simultaneous with us? 98% of the light spectrum is outside our visibility,
Mhm.
about the same in hearing. Our skin has a little bit of tactile. It says it receives and damages about 3 or 4% of all the information it receives. Taste, a little bit different. And then we have other senses, and people don't understand the sense of bilocation, the sense of presence. We have a hunter's
Mhm.
instinct. Just because we suppressed it, we know about the hunter's instinct. We all have it. It's
Yeah.
when you're walking out on the street at night and you feel like you're being watched or something's going to happen, and then all of a sudden a car comes by. Well, it used to be a tiger or an elephant, but today it's a car. Same, but the same skill set is still there. Hmm?
Mhm.
And so, and we don't use it very much, but that's the object of it. But what that means is the vast majority of information out there was invisible to most of human existence to us, and is only now coming into play as we build machines,
Mhm.
devices from our imagination to be able to see into other spectrums. And oh my God, like infravision is like this beautiful space. Ultravision, they have this ultraviolet radiation, which is what
Mhm.
butterflies see. And
Mhm.
it's very different. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous when it's interpreted to us back into our senses. But they see each other in ultraviolet. They see flowers in ultraviolet. You
Mhm.
know, it's beautiful, but it's outside of our own experiences.
And
So,
so,
Mary,
although they live in the same world, they
uh
really don't.
no, we only share a physicality.
Yeah.
Um, Mantis strip have like 11 different types of eyes and senses. I mean, what's their world like? And
Probably drastically different.
yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Well,
and
and
so
think about, we know all the little microscopic creatures that live on and in us.
mhm,
Their experience of this same world we live in would be totally unfamiliar to us if we were able to see it, which to
mhm.
some
Yeah.
extent we've been able to, but not in the sense of really being able to imagine what it's actually like.
And we're getting better and better about even detecting it.
Mhm.
All right, so Mary, Nashville.
Yes.
Nashville, right? I was looking up numbers, and it's like the 16th most likely place around Nashville and the Smoky Mountains and all of that for you to be kidnapped by aliens.
Mm.
Number one place in the world to be kidnapped by aliens appears to be Wyoming, a town in Wyoming. They report 3 to 4 abductions in the Wyoming area every year.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's the same.
Obviously.
So, but what makes you think? So, Nashville, it's all around the world, but Nashville attracts a lot of aliens. So, what do you think about that?
You know, I'm tempted to make a country music joke at this point.
Why
I
don't you?
mean, well, why would Nashville attract aliens
And
and
abductions, particularly abductions.
abductions?
Ooh.
That is a good question, and I'm not. There are some strong ley lines here. The Smoky Mountains are incredible for the amount of energy there. And to me, a lot of abductee reports remind me very much of reports from people who have reported spending time with the Fae in
Mm.
Ireland or
Mhm.
England. So I think that's what a lot of it is. As Lord Don said, it's a spiritual experience.
All right.
I've had many of the experiences that are attributed to alien abduction within the context of psychic training, completely divorced from anything resembling UFOs and alienology. but recognizable. And I attribute them to chakra work.
Mm-hmm.
But I see some of the things in some of these stories, and I say, wait a minute, I've experienced this, but it wasn't like that. But that tells me that there's a spiritual dimension going on with this,
Yeah.
and that people interpret according to what they know. Mary was mentioning the Fae. Among Native American peoples, that same story often occurs with various animal spirits, and the experiences are very similar. The stories are very similar, but the interpretation is very different. And
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I don't think there can be any question that there's something there that all these people have experienced.
Exactly.
But as to what it is, at the very least, we have to acknowledge that it's subject to our interpretation. And then there were two. Okay. Uh, um,
And
and
I just had Jason, and somehow I blocked him. So I'm trying to figure out something that had
oh,
never happened before. Because he was
how
talking about
okay.
interesting.
he had experiences as well. So I'm
Hmm.
trying. So suddenly I wanted to fix that. So, but let me go ahead and offer another question. So, is it possible that there are no aliens out there? We're not only dealing with only something that's basically Gaian or Terran or whatever way you want to call it.
I think that's entirely possible. And it's entirely possible that it's not that way. I don't know that we are at a place in our own evolution that we can tell from the experiences we've had. Um, the experiences I've personally had do not require an extraterrestrial explanation. Um, Although I have worked in doing psychic work, I have occasionally worked with spirits who claimed to be extraterrestrial. I see no reason to doubt them. They were healers in character. And that's often an aspect of these stories of alien experiences. It often involves a physical healing of some kind, um, an opening of some new talent. It and that part usually gets left out of the story because it does not quite fit with the science fiction narrative, for want of a better way to put it. But as to how the only thing I can say about those experiences is that working with those spirits was very helpful. Um, but as far as I could tell, if they were from another planet as opposed to just from another world, if you follow what I mean, they were not visiting in a physical sense. They were maybe astral, maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe something else that I don't have a word for. But they were, and they would leave physical signs. I had one person I worked with at one time who was regularly visited by those spirits who often left considerable markings on her skin, which would last for a day or so and then be gone. Um, but again, she also understood it in a spiritual sense. She did not um, understand it in the I've been abducted by a UFO sense.
So I have not personally experienced anything that I can say I saw an alien strolling down the street.
You'd remember if you
I,
had.
I think I would remember that. Hi, Jason.
Well, Jason's forehead anyway. Hello.
Hey, Jason. Can you hear us?
I don't think
Well,
so.
well,
Oh,
working.
yes. So we're in the process of being joined by Jason.
Yes, we are, although he seems frozen. So I'll go ahead and add that I think it would be very arrogant for us to believe we're the
Mhm.
life only evolved on this planet. I'll also point out right now we don't have a scientific explanation that would allow life to physically travel
Mhm.
between planets. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist,
Mhm.
but
Well,
we don't.
that's yeah. And then that's one of the things we always have to remember, which is that the current knowledge is the current knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we think something was or was not according to our current knowledge doesn't mean we won't find out tomorrow that we were wrong.
It does not, but I will point out that currently we can't
Yeah.
build intergalactic transportation.
No.
So doesn't mean it's not possible, but our current scientific understanding is the speed of light's the barrier.
Mhm.
So I will throw that out that we're not sure it's possible to physically travel.
Now, in the chat room, we have John Phillip, who remarks that his paranormal experiences in this line have mostly occurred in dreams. And that's something that is not infrequent with this kind of experience, um, that it comes to the person as a dream. And some people choose to interpret that as a repressed physical experience, and some people accept it as a dream. And I come from the second school of thought. I think that it has a very real existence, but not necessarily in a physical sense, and therefore is perceived through the dreaming mind. Um,
Never
So
try to
I
fix things while
frequently,
on the air.
okay, I frequently have conversations with my father, my brother,
Mhm,
and my grandparents in my dreams.
mhm.
And
I've
this
had
has
that
started,
experience also.
yeah, this started when my first grandparent to pass, my father's mother, and she did so when I was 8.
Mhm,
And not long after that, she started visiting me in my dreams.
mhm. No, the spirits, the ancestors are all around us, and they will visit if we allow them to. And when they don't, it's usually because we're shutting them out for some reason, possibly out of fear, possibly out of disbelief, possibly out of um, any of a number of emotions. But I'm a great believer in the idea that those who have left this world are still right here with us. Maybe not every moment because they have stuff to do of their own, but but they're here. One of the most interesting dreams, though, of that kind, moving a little afield from ufology, the late Lady Bitterwind, whose birthday will be on 2nd February, um, had a dream of her late father, and in the dream, and if I remember, she had been concerned since his passing if he was okay and wondered about him and so forth. And in the dream, she was in a party, and everybody seemed to be having fun, and there was her father, and he basically said, "Yes, I'm fine. Now go away." Uh, not quite like that, but to the effect that she did not need to worry about him. Um, and when she woke up, she felt very different about the situation. And I think that when we do talk about these alien experiences, quote unquote alien experiences, I think a lot of them are very much in the same range as our experiences with the ancestors, with spirit guides, etc. Um, and that's my take on it. But then, considering my life and my career, it shouldn't surprise anyone that would be my take on it. Of course, I come to it from that angle. It's what I've always done. But I mean, if you ask me, why don't we have more physical proof of these things? I would say because they're not physical.
Right.
Now, and there have been photographs. And when we see these things, when we see orbs of light or what have you, we do very much see them. So you would think they could be photographed. But there's also the fact that even if you get a very good photograph, people's willingness to accept it or not will be based on their belief that they bring to it. You could have the
Yes,
best photo in the world, and some people would not accept it.
this is true.
And then, of course, you could also be that set of photos that famously showed the little wires coming down to the UFOs. And some people would still believe it because they want to.
Yes, this is true.
So it goes both ways.
It does.
But there are actually a lot of interesting photos from the last century of
Mm-hmm.
UFOs or supposed UFOs. And there are a lot of historical stories. And as Ed was pointing out, those historical stories are usually interpreted very differently than we would interpret them. There is a book somewhere in my library, but I'm not going to try to look for it because that would take forever. But I don't remember the name, but it was all about the idea of UFOs in the Bible and interpreting biblical passages as UFOs.
Interesting.
I think it had other stories in it as well, but it goes to show that the way we interpret things is based on where we are now.
Was that the Chariots of the Gods?
No, it was a different one, but Chariots of the
Okay.
Gods is a classic in this
Mhm.
kind of literature. I'll say that some books are better than others.
Yes.
When I was very young, the books like the Chariots of the Gods and that whole series were very interesting to me until
Me too.
I came to a certain point that I realized just how far they were stretching to interpret certain things in certain ways. But the subject is still fascinating. I
Yes.
would just look for slightly different authors.
Now I was looking at medieval paintings that
Hmm.
picture UFOs online
Hmm.
just before we came on. And there are quite a few, and they show your classic disc or cigar shape.
Hmm. There are a few that show what almost looks like a cockpit out of
Hmm.
out of a plane, but without the plane.
Well,
Right.
for me, the Vedics, which
Hmm.
they've dated, which claims to be 35,000 years old, people have argued against that. But the Vedics believed, and if you ever followed all the things, they have a very much a technological bent to them.
Hmm.
And people have said, "Oh, must have been ancient," that. But they built in some of the models from them to have
Hmm.
gliders and other types of plane, and they used a fuel we don't understand called manta. It was a
Hmm.
different type of fuel, and we'd call it spiritual or energy fuel. Um, we haven't found it. And then they talked about the weapons. The monkey god having to drop
Hmm.
those weapons, the spears from the skies that burned, and people had to run into the rivers, and they had to hide from it.
Hmm.
They have
Yeah.
found a radioactive city, an ancient and a city full of radioactivity in India.
Hmm.
From a very old that glass and everything else, and they said this really fits the Vedics. So you talk about Lemuria and Atlantis, but they had their own culture right there on the Asian continent.
Hmm.
That if you believe the story, that Krishna the monkey guy back into the Stone Age.
Hmm. Yes,
Uh,
yes, that is a fascinating subject because when you read those descriptions from a modern perspective, they
mm-hmm,
really do sound like our modern nuclear warfare
mm-hmm,
or something similar.
Exactly.
yeah. So yeah, I found that interesting.
Mhm,
So I'm more likely to accept that there was ancient civilizations that reached some of these technological levels than I am
mhm,
aliens from other planets.
mhm,
I do think there was a whole civilization before us. I feel it in my bones. I've dreamt of it. We all have Atlantis stories. We have them,
mhm.
Right.
and they did reach the skies and things like that. But I still think this is a superior culture. Technologically, we're much farther along than they were. All the evidence points to high level steam, to other things, but that's my personal belief. But yeah, but we talk about one. I want to talk about one more set of aliens that people believe might exist, the hollow Earth theory and everything else,
Oh,
and one
yes.
and one that science fiction is always talking about. Voyager had a story about that. And I thought that was funny. I'll mention that after, and that's called the Sarans. There is a possibility, and often a very big belief, that the Sarans were an advanced civilization
Mhm,
right up until the extinction event, and that they were intelligent reptiles. To a reptile, and there's some evidence and some belief that they may have gotten into space. They gotten into other places, but this would be 65, 70 million years ago. And when that meteor hit, they would not have been able to do anything about it. Some of the aliens, some of the things we see on Mars, 65 million years ago, Mars was a little bit more inhabitable.
yes,
You
that's
know,
true.
they
Yeah.
had more worms, and so they think the Sarans may have gone there. I mean, there's some evidence out there of the idea that we evolved another intelligent species. Now, this was poo-pooed, but now we're starting to see how intelligent crows are, how intelligent
Mhm,
parrots are, and the fact that the whales have this deep, deep
deep, deep
language.
language.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I'm that, and in Voyager, Star Trek Voyager, right? They met up with some aliens who were reptilian, and he took samples. He was a scientist, a nice scientist. Took samples of it, of all the part of that, and he was studying. He didn't believe that the dinosaurs had the Saurian race had emerged from there. He thought they came from another space, and he matched the DNA. Say, you're from the same planet as we are. You're different like that. It's like, and how'd you get here? Well, I believe the mythology said 65 million years ago or whatever, we landed here, right? That the
Mhm,
gods created us here. The egg hatched, and his civilization changed. Oh my God, there's still people on the planet we left, and I always thought that was a very funny because nobody wanted to believe him. Oh my God, how could he be that?
Mm-hmm.
But but I thought that was a very funny idea that we may have had another race, and spiritually they would be keep popping up the dragon, the lizard
mhm.
people, and things of that nature. So what do you think about that?
I think given the length of time that what we'll loosely call dinosaurs existed, I don't think it's at all unlikely that some of them were far more intelligent than we have formerly given them credit for, even to the point of being a civilization, which probably would not have looked much like ours, but that
Mm.
is only to be expected. And when we look, you were saying about the intelligence of birds as we're seeing now, we know that they're descended from dinosaurs, which implies that the dinosaurs, even though their brains weren't necessarily terribly large, could have been far more intelligent than we've given them credit for. Because one of the things that we have learned is that the brain is not the by all and end all that we used to think it was, and that some creatures have a more decentralized brain, for want of a better way to put it. Jason, you have a whole face. Yay.
Yes, I have a whole face. Yes.
Hi, Jason.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Share your
So,
encounter.
Well, I have had two encounters, uh, both with flying orbs.
mhm,
One was when I was living in Newport, Indiana. It's near it was a VX nerve gas depot. Where they manufactured it and then they stored it for several years until they incinerated it. The other time was in Petersburg. I was in my backyard, just saw, I think it was, if I remember right, orbs like in a triangle shape, just flying overhead, and then they just disappeared both times.
Mm. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
And you know, so many people have this experience. There must be something.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, it was like a spy plane or something as being so close to the VX,
Right.
where they store the VX gas. I mean, the other time was just no rhyme or reason. I mean, there's nothing near Newport.
Mm.
I mean, farmland.
My encounter was in my hometown of Chattanooga, and there is nothing really significant militarily speaking there. And there is no swamp gas in Chattanooga either.
Mm. And the experiences that I had were in Danville, Illinois, where there are no swamps that I know of. Certainly not anywhere near where I was. And it really seems to me that a lot of the attempts to explain these things away are less likely than the original interpretation.
Yes.
Yes.
I've heard ball lightning is one of the explanations.
Mm-hmm.
Swamp gas, of course, one of the big ones. But
Yes.
what I saw, it could not be, could not be ball lightning. It was a clear, beautiful, starry night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, both accounts. So, there's no way it could have been ball lightning. No way.
Yeah. All 3 days it was dawn, the sun was coming up on a clear day. There was no ball lightning, no swamp gas. If it was a earthbound flying craft, it's not one I'm aware of because the light stayed steady for several minutes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In one place.
Like I said, I threw up my first experience being some type of, some spying, some because of the VX.
Right.
I mean, because that would be a tactical place to strike if you were wanting to cause terror. I mean, if you blow that gas up, it would go in the atmosphere and cause mass death and panic and worry.
Yeah.
My great uncle that he lived to be 90. He actually worked at the VX plant when it was operational. So did my grandfather, and he described some of the things that happened there during his tenure there. When they were transporting it, they transported it with rabbits, and to see if there was a leak, they would open it up, and if there were dead rabbits, that's. But
alas, poor rabbit.
Yeah, alas, poor rabbit.
Very cool.
Now, back to the question of intelligent dinosaurs, it's certainly plausible.
Well, scientists are even saying that they believe they were more intelligent than they formerly thought, although they haven't gone quite this far. But I question whether that we may not find that in fact some of them were far more intelligent than we have previously thought. I would not be the least bit surprised. Obviously, it's not all of them.
Right.
I'm very hard pressed to see a Stegosaurus piloting a spacecraft or something like that.
A T-Rex with the arms, just not.
Yeah. I shall pilot this craft very carefully. But but we know there is such a wide variety And there are still new varieties being found of these creatures that that who knows what we haven't found yet. And there are historical anomalies that are known that have not been explained, that are mostly just ignored.
Mhm.
And what can you draw from that? You know, I don't know how much you should draw from it, except that there's more than we fully understand. Um, and then, of course, you've got people who will take this same idea to its farthest extreme and end up with total nonsense.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's all nonsense.
I mean,
One
even
of the
throughout
things
our,
I find interesting.
I mean, even through our human understanding, great civilizations that have developed technologies that we're still barely understanding now.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
mechanisms to that astronomical occurrences
Mhm.
that we use computers today to determine. They did it with mechanics, and
Yeah.
you know,
And it increasingly looks like they did it earlier than we used to think too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
one of the most interesting theories in recent years had to do, I believe, with the Lascaux cave paintings. And in the Lascaux cave paintings, there are little black dots accompanying some of the animals. And there has come forward a theory that these represent constellations, and therefore astronomy/astrology, at a very much earlier point than anyone expected it. And with it also comes the question, what else could the little black dots be?
Right.
There are other possible answers, but it's very tantalizing to think, because we know early peoples were concerned with celestial happenings, that it might go back just that far.
Right.
One of the things I find interesting that usually gets drug into to ufology are the Paracas skulls. And for those who are not familiar with the Paracas skulls, they are a group of elongated skulls and the conventional wisdom is that they were done like other elongations of skulls, that the heads of the children were bound to shape the head into a long form. But there are some problems with this theory, one of which is that these skulls seem to have more bone than a human skull normally has. They've not just been reshaped, there's more there, which could still admit of many different possibilities, but it's a very interesting question because there's no question these exist. You can go Google them and find dozens of pictures right now. But head binding has certainly been a thing in many human cultures. But this is not really the result that it normally creates, which raises some very interesting questions to which there are at present no answers. Supposedly, there had been a DNA test on the skulls that found non-human DNA, but the problem was the person who did the test and owned the testing company was also the one writing books about the subject,
right.
which makes it a
Yeah.
little hard to take.
And no one
But it's
else
interesting.
did
Yeah.
a test.
But it is an interesting effect.
So let's give our last thoughts on the UFO and the UFO phenomena and all around there. So it's that time of the evening again.
Yes.
And if you were chatting with us, I'm having really difficulties. If you're chatting with us, we may have been on longer. So, but why don't we give everybody give a last opinion about what you just thought, and then we'll come right back to our next week's shows.
Well, I guess I will go first and say again, my belief is that what is usually described as UFO phenomena are more in the nature of spiritual or non-physical experiences than what they're normally represented as being. And exactly what they are in that context, I don't know that we can truly say we know, but I think that's the context we truly find them in.
Mary?
Well, like I said, I certainly can't say I've ever really identified an alien on Earth. And a lot of what I've read from people who have supposedly encountered aliens read like encounters with the Fae. So I tend to agree with Lord Don that they do not, they seem to follow a pattern that's well established, that we are encountering another level of being that exists on the earth with us.
And Jason, do you have any last comments?
I do agree with my co-people, but I also believe that it is a possibility. I mean, to think that we're the only life in this vast universe, could there be a possibility of aliens? Absolutely. Do I believe
Definitely.
that? I mean, absolutely.
Mm.
Could it just be another creature on a different level of existence that we're not on that same frequency with? Absolutely.
Mm.
We call them aliens. We call them spiritual beings. I mean, fae, even God. I mean, they could
Mm.
even be on that level. I mean, some of these encounters that have been in ancient times could be just interactions with these spiritual beings at a higher level that they refer to as gods.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
And these ideas are not mutually exclusive either.
Mm-mm.
Well, Don, I guess that's it. So maybe can you do a prayer for us and then to close us out?
I can do that. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to have clarity in our spiritual experiences. Help us to have understanding and insight. Help us to accept that there are some things about which we can only speculate. And help us to have knowledge of those things of which knowledge is possible. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, with love and with respect, we thank you, and may you blessed be.
Blessed
And
be.
may you blessed be until next time.
Blessed be.